Welcome to Hot Off the Press, the show about new releases and the authors that bring you to you. We'll go ahead and go around the room here and have each of them introduce themselves, and we'll start with you, Don.
Hi, my name is Donald J. Bingle. I'm a writer mostly of thrillers, and I'll be talking about my latest one tonight.
Perfect. Elle?
I'm Elle Keaton, and I write both I write male romance, contemporary male romance, and also romantic suspense. And I will be talking about a non-romantic suspense new release tonight.
Perfect. And Becke?
I'm Becke Turner, and I write contemporary romance. Primarily, I do the sweet, feel-good type of romance.
All right, thank you. Now, before we get into your new releases, and I'll go ahead and start with you, Elle, let us know a little bit about your journey to becoming a published author.
Oh, that's such a big question. But it's a good one. I mean, I've been always self-published. It's a little over 4 years now, but like a lot of authors, I've always been writing and had it in the background and finished that book and thought, I can write that book. So finally, I put my money where my mouth was and wrote a book and self-published in 2017, I guess. And it is a romantic suspense. And I just really never stopped. I finally quit my day job. Well, luckily or not, I guess, I quit my day job in October of 2019. So I had a pretty intense first year trying to make it as an author. But I'm getting there, and I love it. I mean, that's all I got to say. Did you want me to talk about my new book now, or should we just keep going?
Yep, we'll get to it with the next question.
Okay, cool.
All right, Becke. What about your journey?
My journey has been a long one. I wrote my first book on a manual typewriter with my son crawling around on the floor, and he is now a Navy pilot, so he's a little older than crawling around on the floor. And I've written about 18 books, and after being orphaned in traditional publishing and having an agent and going the long route, and I was a Golden Heart finalist in 19, which was the last year of it. And finally, in October of this year, I self-published my first book, and now I'm on my 6th.
Wow. All right, Don.
I'm a gamer turned writer, back probably before most of the people on this panel or in the audience were born. I was a role-playing gamer at all sorts of big and small conventions. My first Gen Con was 1979. And I was the world's top ranked player of classic role-playing tournaments for the last 15 years of the last century. So that's 1985 to 2000 for those of you who don't like to do math. So I went from playing in those games to writing RPGA adventures, to writing for various game companies, including TSR in West End, and then segued into short stories. I've had 60-some short stories published, and segued from that into writing novels, and now have 7 books out.
All right, perfect. So my next question, and I'll start with you, Becke. Let's talk about this new release. What is, where did you get the idea for this book or series, if it's part of a series?
It's part of a series, but I'd rather talk about where I got the idea for this book. I retired from IBM Watson in the healthcare industry 2 years ago, and I started volunteering with service dogs. And so that was where the birth of this book was. It's between a veterinarian and a trainer of service dogs. And these dogs are just fabulous. And it's interesting because they not only help disabled people, but they also work with children and autistic children. So this is a single dad, and he's a veterinarian, and it's a trainer is the heroine in the story. So that is the whole inspiration for the story. It's very sweet. It's very emotional. And like I said, I love the dog, so I love doing the story. I love talking about, how she does the training, how they impact the characters. For instance, service dogs actually pick up emotions from people. And so if you're, for instance, PTSD or whatever, the dog can feel that. And when they have a hug that they give you, and they'll lean against your leg. And that gives you a grounding that says, you know what, I'm having some problems here. And you kind of makes you more aware of that. But I used all that information that I learned about the dogs in the story. So the story to me, is just, I'm very close to the story for that reason.
All right, perfect. Don, what about you?
Well, back when I was writing a lot of short stories, I kind of fell into the position of being the replacement writer for a lot of DAW themed anthologies. And when they had somebody who didn't turn in a story on time or who wrote short, I would get asked to turn a short story in a fairly short amount of time. And one of my editors for that also was the editor for my first 2 books. And he sent me an invitation because Gold Eagle at the time was doing Room 59 spy thrillers. And they were using a bunch of writers that were all using the same pen name. And so he asked me if I wanted to write one of those, and I did. And then the entire series was canceled well before my book was scheduled to come out. So I got the rights back to it, and that was the beginning of the Dick Thornby thrillers. And basically there's 2 things going on in the series that are the hooks for it, I guess. One is that Dick is not a loner like Jason Bourne, and he's not this posh tuxedo guy like James Bond. He's a regular guy. He's got a wife, a mortgage, a kid. His family at the beginning of the series doesn't know he's a spy. So he has to deal with all of those things, including a boss who thinks he uses too many explosives. And there's some office politics going on. The other thing that is kind of the hallmark of the series is that it deals with various things that are much ballyhooed and talked about on the internet, whether that's conspiracy theories, and I'm talking the old school conspiracy theories, not this recent stuff, with underground fortresses and lizardmen and things like that going on, disasters that are looming that most people don't know about, and that kind of thing. And he deals with those, sometimes debunking them and sometimes finding what the kernel of truth is that gave rise to them. So there's 3 series in the series: Net Impact, Wet Work, and Flash Drive. In Flash Drive, the premise basically is that his family's found out he's a spy. He's on the outs with his agency and forced to do an off the books mission where he has to take his family along, and he's very unhappy about that. And he has to go to Australia and investigate some historic events and some recent events and find out what the connection is.
All right, thank you. And Elle, how about you?
Sure. So this series actually popped kind of into my head. The series is actually, I'll start at the beginning. It's called Crimes of the Heart. And mostly I titled it that in order to mean, like, not when necessarily people treat each other badly, but when you do silly things that cause a breakup or whatever, and then throughout the course of the story it gets fixed. And I came up with this about a couple years ago, actually, and it just took me a while to write it. It's a very different style than I normally write in. I do normally write a lot of romantic suspense, so writing a character-driven novel instead of a novel where external forces move characters through the novel is a lot more work for me, but it's really good work because it makes me explore new ways of writing. So this book here is the 2nd book in the series, and I don't have a physical copy of it. And it comes out on Thursday, actually. And there's a lot of coffee in all of my books because I am from Seattle, which is why I have coffee up there. So these books are all set in Seattle, on top of being kind of not young adult, but 20s, in their 20s. All the characters in each of the 3 books are in their 20s. It's also kind of my way of writing a story that's set in Seattle that's actually true to Seattle, because it's like a pet peeve of mine. I'm sure it is for everybody that writes about the city. But anyway, so that's where I came up with the idea. And the first one follows two people. There are three people in the beginning, and then each of them then getting their own story. And they're all kind of lighthearted, although the second one is less lighthearted than the other. I'm trying to think of what else you need to know. This is the first one. There you go. There's the first one, Fainted Love. I actually had to change the title. That's a funny little story because I was calling it the V-Card Caper, which I only meant it as a funny thing. Like this was this guy's like way of finding his partner again, was getting like fake revenge for something that happened several years ago. But then when I went to the big company to advertise it, they told me I couldn't with that title, which I think is interesting, but that's a whole nother kettle of fish. So I changed it to Fainted Love. So now if you have that stuck in your head, I'm sorry. It's the soft cell song, Tainted Love. So that's that, my story of my books.
All right, perfect. So my next question is, I've asked a lot of authors for their writing routine, and I've gotten probably more different ones than authors, surprisingly. But I do want to go ahead and I'll start with you, Dawn. Tell us a little bit about what your routine is like right now. That could be when you write, plotter, pantser, the whole ordeal.
Well, I'm going to be the very bad example because I don't write every day. I don't write every week. I don't even write every month. I write in spurts. Certainly, if I have a deadline, I will write to make that deadline. I don't miss deadlines. And even if they're self-imposed deadlines. And I've written as much as 11 or 12,000 words in a single sitting. But I don't write all the time. I write quickly when I write, and when I do write, I need to have pretty much quiet. I don't answer the phone. I don't answer the door. I don't put on music. I try to take the dog out as infrequently as I can without accidents, and I take care of business. In terms of whether I'm a plotter or not, my rule of thumb is I know where I'm starting, and I know where I'm going, and I know of 2 or 3 places I want to visit along the route. And before I start, I will have no more than a single page of random things written down. Those can be the start, the places I want to stop or whatever, or they can be lines of dialogue that have occurred to me or incidents that have occurred to me before I start writing. And then I sit down and I write sequentially from the beginning to the end.
All right, perfect. Elle, what about you?
Well, I'm mostly a pantser, but that's the more I write, the more I evolve into to be more efficient. I plot more, which I think is not uncommon. I do try to write every day. I always feel kind of weird if I don't, but at the same time, there's that need to give yourself a day off and to rejuvenate your brain and to do things. So a typical day for me is coming in and working and writing, and I can do between 3 and 7,000 words a day, generally closer to the 3 end, but I can definitely do the more. And actually, since I have a self-imposed deadline, I do have to be doing that. And I write in the morning. I can write to music, but it can't have words, or it can't be new music. Like it has to be something I've heard 75,000 times, so that it's just like on this kind of track in my head, and it doesn't pull me out of my words. I did learn, I tried a bunch of stuff last year while we were, not, staying in the house more, and thinking that they would help me. You hear, I need to do this, or you'll be more productive if you do this other thing. And the biggest lesson I learned at the end of the year is to trust what you do and to trust what your how you've been doing things. Maybe a few things can be tweaked, but you don't need to go like throwing the baby out with the bathwater, as my social studies teacher used to say in high school. So I generally I generally know the beginning. Obviously, it's romance, so there's going to be a happily ever after that I am aiming for. And I do, that's what I tend to follow. I don't write sequentially all the time. If I come up with a really good idea for a scene, I'll definitely go and write that down, at least so that I know I don't forget about that idea, right? So, and I do use beta readers or alpha readers, I guess. Sometimes if I start feeling like I'm lost in the weeds of a story, for instance, the one that's coming out on Thursday, I just struggled with it a lot. And part of it, I think too, it's just because of the circumstances, but I definitely struggled with it. And so I reached out to someone who reads for me and am very, very happy. I don't think it would be the story it is without that help. We write in a vacuum, but we also don't write in a vacuum, because we need input. So that's what I do.
All right. Becke, how about your process?
I guess I'm a little bit different than all of you all. I'm very regimented. I'm also kind of a health nut. So the first thing in the morning for me is exercise. And once I do that, then I, take a shower and I come to work. And to me, I'm a driven person, so I always have to go to work. I enjoy the work. I enjoy doing it. Everything, my stories all come out of characters. So I developed the characters, on this one because I wanted to have the dog. It was like, what could be the conflict between them? And with these dogs, the trainer depends on vets. So that's how that developed. And so, I have the conflict, and then I develop each of the characters. And this is a single dad with a child. So I developed the 3 characters. I write usually every day. I take Sunday afternoons off to paint by numbers, believe it or not. And, I write until I'm tired. And when the words don't come anymore, then I get up and usually, I'll go exercise again, or I'll work a puzzle or do something to kind of get away from it. And then I either come back or I'll take the rest of the day off. But I always start in the morning, and I always usually write every day that way. But it always starts with the characters. I do have my turning points. So I guess I do plot out the main points and the turning points in the story. And like she says, it's a happily ever after, so I know how it's going to end. I mean, I'm working in a setting, so my series is all at a setting set in North Carolina. So that's already done. The other characters are there. I keep a Bible for that. So that's pretty much how I operate on every day. And I have I have self-imposed deadlines, and I typically meet those.
All right, perfect. So my next question, and I will start with you, Elle. What surprised you the most while writing this book or series? And again, this could be either in the story or something you found out while researching, or something you just learned about yourself during it.
Well, that's a very good question. I guess I kind of mentioned it before, was that this one was surprisingly hard. And I am writing in first person too, which is not normally how I write. So it's definitely a different headspace to get into. One of the big things I discovered just before I started writing this book, and Becke kind of touched on it, is that I had let myself I hadn't been good about getting my own exercise, and like the physical exercise made such a big difference when I started getting out again and in outside. And here, of course, in Seattle, it's rainy and it's wet and it's dark, and I just had to put that aside. I don't go first thing in the morning, but I go every day after when I'm tired and can't go anymore. I definitely do that. And I think that was kind of surprising, and I really feel like I've learned that rather than feeling like that exercise takes time away from my writing, that exercise, in fact, is giving me more writing because I'm more energized and I have ideas, and I come, when you're just walking along and there's nothing yammering at you other than the crows. You know, you can think and ideas bubble to the surface, and that's been fun for me. That's been a good experience, and it's really, I mean, just with this particular book that I just am putting out.
Right.
So,
Becke, how about you?
I just recently discovered the theme that I have going through all my books. And, you know, after 18, you would think I would have gotten a clue, but I didn't quite know what that was. And then when I went back and looked at my body of work, I always write about characters either coming home or building a home. So when you pick up one of my books, that's what's going to happen. These two characters are going to build a home together, or they're going to come home. And a lot of times it's people that have been far away and then they come home. And I don't know if that, you know, I don't know if it's your own personal experience that brings that, but that's typically what mine are. And I also have, I do little children well. So that's probably, you know, one of my strong points. And I finally said, okay, this is what I do well. I'm going to do this more. So those are the things I've learned.
All right, perfect. So Don, what surprised you while writing this?
Well, you know, the thing that surprised me, even though it started out as one of the premises of the whole series, is just that there are amazing variety of useful and incredibly bizarre things on the internet. If you know, I have a Czech character, and she swears, and I decided that she should swear in Czech. And so I don't know any Czech, and I certainly don't know any Czech swear words, but there are plenty of sites where you can find out Czech swear words. And there are plenty of sites where you can find out how Native Hawaiians will pronounce something versus non-Native Hawaiians will pronounce the same word. And there are bizarre theories of all sorts. And you can go down just incredible rabbit holes of speculation and supposed, you know, maps and resources and lists of underground fortresses and bizarre speculations about all sorts of things. And some of those have lengthy YouTube videos associated with them. But on the other hand, if you're doing a scene and you need to know what the horsepower is of a certain boat, you can find that pretty readily. And you know, the internet is better at this than it used to be. When I was writing one of my first books, I think I spent the better part of a day trying to figure out if a VW microbus came standard with an FM radio. If I had that same search to do now, I could probably find that out pretty quickly. It's just, there are a lot of weird things out there, and it's fun to look at them, but it's scary to think that some people spend a lot of time looking at them and believing every single thing they read.
Perfect. So my next question, and I'll start with you, Becke. You've kind of touched on it with one of your other answers, but if you go a little more in depth of what you did to research for this book.
Other than the volunteer, well, the veterinarian part wasn't, I've been trained in medicine, so that part was fairly easy for me. Plus, when I ran the family cattle ranch, I did a lot of you do a lot of your own animal work, you have to. So that part was, the research was pretty easy. Sometimes, you know, I would call a colleague that was at PALS on different issues. What else did I have to? Oh, I had to learn about child custody in North Carolina because it's different in all states. So those were issues that I had to find out. So, you know, and it's kind of interesting because he was talking about going down a rabbit hole. When you start doing the research, it's like, you know, you have to be, I usually have to set the timer otherwise, because and this is shiny. I like this. Oh, look at here, you know, and you go on and on and on. So those are probably the primary things that I had to research.
All right, perfect. Don, what about you?
A good part of Flash Drive is set in Australia, And the entire book was written during my involuntary staycation over the last year. So I couldn't go to any of the places that I talk about. So I had to use the internet to figure out everything I wanted to describe, whether that's the distance between two locations or what the scenery looks like along the way, or what they produce, or what tourist attractions there are nearby, or what's on the menu at the restaurant, at the hotel. And there's just an incredible amount of information that you can get from the internet. On the other hand, you can't get everything. You can't get some certain nuances or understand that you may be looking at things with an American view necessarily from just looking at the written word. So I had a couple of beta readers who are from Australia who would explain to me, no, this looks more like this than that, or this is the expression people use, or whatever. One of the things, for example, was one of the terms used for the outback is whoop whoop. It's also sometimes called the never never, but it's never called the whoop whoop. It's always out whoop whoop, no the. But if you're talking never never, you always put a the in front of it. Now that's not the kind of thing you can get necessarily, or even if you get it, you won't necessarily notice it when you see it on the internet. But if you've got some locals who can help you out, that can be very, very useful. And so I appreciate all of the help they gave me for little nuances like that. Being able to find what I needed to find.
Perfect. Elle.
Sure. So I was writing, or this book is set in my home city that I have spent many, many years in. And so it was kind of a challenge because I wanted to, one of my goals, is to present some things that maybe people don't know, that they didn't learn from You Got Mail or Sleepless in Seattle or any Frasier or any of the other shows, that are constantly that are on, that people have gotten this idea of Seattle from. So one of my characters in this book, one of my main characters, he's actually a trivia guy, and because that's just his relationship with his grandfather, is that they who is from Italy and came here. And so part of what I learned that I didn't even know, having grown up here, is that part of the city used to be called Garlic Gulch because a lot of Italians came here and settled, and that wasn't a derogatory term. It actually, they had a lot of restaurants, and they had farms, and it actually it did smell garlicky, apparently. This is what I learned. This is from the internet, I will confess. So that was kind of a cool thing. And I just wanted to find some things that people didn't really, the gum wall, a lot of people know about the gum wall. So that was kind of fun to kind of delve into what random things would people not know that were still interesting and not just some kind of boring historical fact about Seattle. That was my little rabbit hole. And of course, every single time I ended up spending way too long on the internet because you can only do it so many times. So that was me. That's what I learned. I learned some cool things that I wasn't even taught. So that was cool.
I think Elle's absolutely right too. When I think about books that I've read, I will often remember some little bit of information that I didn't know that was cool or awesome in some way. And that's the kind of thing that can really draw in a reader and make them a reader of your other work, is if you have one or two or whatever of those tidbits that are just genuinely interesting to people who don't know them.
Exactly. All right. So my next question starts with you, Dawn. What do you hope people take away from reading this book?
My thrillers are meant to be entertaining. They're not meant to solve world problems. They're meant to give you a thrill ride and some unexpected fun and a few action scenes along the way. And so if people are entertained, that's fine. If they learn something cool, that's even better. If they want to tell their friends about it, that's absolutely the best. But all of my writing is not really directed towards some political goal or some overarching theory of the universe. I can look at my short stories and I can see some themes among them, but they're really just there to do what I've been asked to do. In the short stories, I'm asked to write a certain thing. And in my books, well, the first one, I was actually asked to write a certain thing. I was asked to write a spy novel, set in a certain kind of agency, located in a certain kind of place. But within that, they're just entertainment and fun.
All right, perfect. Elle, how about you?
Wow, what do
Other
readers-
than the tidbits.
yeah. Well, I mean, I write romance. I want to write a book that makes people feel good at the end. And are all romance realistic? Are the characters necessarily super realistic? Now, I mean, not always. These particular characters I feel are, like Becke was saying earlier, I tend to also write from my personal experience and from, the life that I have lived. I tend to write a lot about people that don't have regular jobs, or what we would call a regular job, because I personally think that's a ridiculous label. I would have dropped the F-bomb right there, but I forgot to just, put it in. My characters are artists and they make their living that way. My characters are, teach yoga or something so I guess what I want people to take away is that there's more, that they can read this and be happy at the end. I've met some different and interesting people that are a lot of different people that I've probably met in my life. I'm not the writer who is going to put somebody that they don't like in and then kill them off. That's generally not what I do, but it's hard. You can't write without using your life experiences. So I guess I just want people to enjoy the characters I've created and root for them and root for their happily ever after. And then when they get to the end and the epilogue, and they can have that good feeling and hold it for a little while.
All right, perfect. And Becke?
I think primarily what I want readers to take away with the book is that there is hope for connection. And I think the connection can be between, in this case, it was a family, but that connection can be just two people, as long as there's somebody else besides you. I think as humans, we need that connection. And I would like to think that everybody can hope that there's a connecting person out there for everyone.
All right, thank you. Now the last question I have. Oh, sorry. Okay. The last question I had is, how does being a writer impact you as a reader? And I'll start with you, Elle.
Can you say the question again? I had a little glitch.
Okay. How does being a writer impact you as a reader?
Oh, that's a great
question. Read more? Are you able to disconnect the writer brain?
That's a great question. And it really depends on how my writing is going. So if I'm struggling writing, I will go in and read books in my genre, and I won't turn off my writer brain. I'll like, not that I'm not saying I go in and copy, but I listen to the cadence of the sentence, and I think about how they crafted their story and what I like and what I don't like. And if I'm, on vacation or whatever, actually I read a lot of nonfiction anymore. I didn't read as much nonfiction before I went to full-time authoring. But I do read less because I have a goal and reading interferes with it. But I still read in my genre a lot, and I like to support the other authors in any in the whole romance umbrella, not just authors in my little tiny niche, but I read everything. And like I said, sometimes I'll read something totally opposite in order to kind of get cred, to get back on track, or to get that kind of excited feeling about writing again. But I think it's good to read. I think it's good to keep your hand in, and it's good to see what's going on outside of your own little writer bubble. So I'm all for reading, and I definitely keep up with it.
Becky.
I think it's made me a jaded reader. I had a hard time with that for a while because I was too critical. I mean, I see, I'm constantly looking to improve my own work, so I can't turn that off. But number one, I don't read, I listen. So I'm an audio person. I do that a lot of the times while I'm exercising or in the car or painting. I like all genres. I typically, a lot of times, will go outside of my genre. And I like to read just about anything. I mean, I'm sorry, I like molecular diagnostics. Did a lot of genetics. So that was one of the things that I read, but I just like science, and I'm kind of a geeky that way. But I love thrillers. I love suspense. I love romance. I don't think I love women's fiction. I love historical women's fiction, especially the World War II. I found that terribly interesting. I don't know where I was in the history class. I mean, I made A's in it, but I guess I was totally just memorizing and not learning. So I find that terribly interesting. So I guess it's made me more of an expansive reader. So I do listen for the rhythms of different writer style. And I just think the more you read, probably the more it brings to your own work.
Perfect. And Don.
Well, back many, many years ago in the early days of Knights of the Dinner Table comic book, if you know that, I did movie reviews for them. And I found that doing movie reviews affected my watching of movies. I also review a lot of books on Amazon. And so over the years, I got to say that I have a critical eye on movies, on television shows, and on books towards what the author is doing and why they're doing it, and some things that I do and don't like about a particular style of writing, whether that's movies, TV, or books. I don't read in genre when I'm actively writing in that genre. But since I'm not always actively writing, because I do it in spurts, I do read some spy thrillers and other types of things. I've also read a lot of sci-fi and fantasy because I write a lot of short stories in those areas. Those are areas of interest to me. I do have very definite opinions about certain structures that are overused or trite. And I do my best not to express those too much on social media, because social media being what it is, it just causes difficulties. But I do think that there are tropes that are overused. I have, in fact, had somebody hand me a book and say, you must read this book, and taken the book and read like 3 chapters, and then had them come up to me and say, well, did you finish the book last night? What did you think? And I said, I've only read 3 chapters, but I will tell you that the climactic scene will occur in this place and will involve this piece of machinery, because the author was clumsy about putting in seemingly irrelevant information too early in the book that he wants you to kind of forget you read and then bring back later. And I think that those are the kinds of things that, if you notice as a reader, you will be more mindful of as a writer. So yes, it decreases my enjoyment sometimes of reading and watching material, but it is also very instructive for my own writing.
All right, perfect. And I want to thank all of you for joining us. But before we leave, let's go around again and let people know where they can find you. And I'll start with you, Becky.
You can find me at BeckeTurner.com, and I spell my name with an E. which is, I know, odd, but that was how a first grader spelled Becke. So that's the easiest way to find me. Or you can find me in Amazon author. It's Becke Turner again, and all of my handles are all Becke Turner.
All right, perfect. Don?
All of my handles are Donald J. Bingle, no period. Facebook, Goodreads, whatever. Website, same thing. And you can find a lot of information, more information than you probably ever want to know about my writing at my website, and sign up for a newsletter in which you will see me express some opinions that I don't do on social media.
All right. Finally, Elle.
Sure. You can find me. It's always Elle Keaton. Sometimes I've had to add like author or something at the end, but I'm on Facebook. I have an author group on Facebook called The Highway to Elle, which, yes, thank you very much, is a very clever name, but it's not easily searchable. I have my own website, of course. I'm on Instagram and Twitter. Twitter is I'm more political on Twitter. It's actually not under Elle Keaton, but I do believe that if a person searched Elle Keaton, you would find my Twitter, which is fine. I follow all sorts of different kinds of people. Goodreads, BookBub, all those places, just Elle Keaton. That's me.
All right. And again, I want to thank all of you for coming in, and I want to thank everyone for watching. So see you guys next time. Bye.
Take care.
Thanks for having me.